Welcome to C-Suite Elevated, the podcast in which we help executives and the organizations they lead rise to meet their highest potential. I am your host, Christy Angel. Today, we dive into the strategic importance of interim leadership in times of organizational transition. I am pleased to welcome my guest, Sandra Murphy, a seasoned nonprofit leader and board chair of YWCA Greater Flint. Sandra walks us through her journey of recognizing the need for change, but within the board and the executive leadership of the organization. Following the resignation of their CEO, she took a proactive approach, and her leadership through uncertainty highlights the critical role of interim executives in resetting culture, rebuilding trust, and preparing the organization for long-term success. Sandra emphasizes why interim leadership is not just a stopgap, but a strategic investment. She advocates for listening deeply to community and staff, being honest about the organization's culture, and understanding the unique role an interim plays. This episode is a masterclass in how interim leadership, when done right, can be a catalyst for sustainable growth and mission alignment. Welcome, Sandra Murphy, to Broadview Talent's first podcast, where we are talking about the value of interim leadership. Sandra Murphy, you and I had a chance to work together last, that would have been, I guess, summer and fall, and doing some great work for YWCA Greater Flint. And I would love for you to just share a little bit about your experience, how long you served on that board, your connection to YWCA Greater Flint, and your background.
Sure. Well, I'm most appreciative, Christy, of your asking me to do this. It's a great story. I'm thrilled to share the story and the success that we encountered. I have been serving as the board chair for the last 2 years. I've been on the board 4 years. And prior to that, I was in the community of Flint, working with the Community Foundation of Greater Flint, and was keenly aware as a nonprofit that we funded of the programmatic and leadership challenges that our local YW had. So when I was asked to join the board, I was retired, and I came with a lot of information from observing as the funder role. My background has been in nonprofit management since my career started, which has been like almost 50 years of program development, fund development, strategic planning, and I have worked for statewide organizations and then local ones, all focused on family support programs. So that included child abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence. So I came with a lot of that information. And it was clear to me in the first year that I was seated on the board that there were leadership challenges both for the board and for the CEO and her leadership team.
And so you joined the board, and how long after you're joining the board, Sandra, did you realize you were going to have a transition?
2 years.
It was 2 years. Okay, so 2 years. So you've been in transition your entire tenure.
Yes, I have. And what was apparent to me, and one of the reasons why I had been initially recruited for the board, was that the board needed strengthening. There had been people who would leave midterm. There were people who weren't right from the get-go. There were people who'd been there for extended terms and were tired and felt lost about what to do. So, this complicated, of course, what the CEO was trying to do with fulfilling the mission, hiring staff, maintaining state contracts. So there was not just concern around the culture for staff, there was concern that I initially saw with the board. And so my first 2 years, I focused on understanding what the board's needs were. And then I was chair of the nominating committee and started working on recruiting a stronger bench of board members.
And so you were building the board, you realize you're going through a transition. What were you feeling? What's the next step when you realized our CEO is going to leave, our executive director is going to leave, and now we need to go about, stabilizing probably the organization, the staff, and hiring a new leader?
Yeah, I was so grateful that I early on connected with YWCA USA and our membership representative. She was invaluable to me, was my sounding board every step of the way as I recruited new board members and was having to deal with what that fallout was in the community, because the community is not that big. And people have been around a long time. So she guided me with messaging and strategic thinking. And then when we got to the point where our CEO offered her resignation, I had already identified with other members of the executive team that we did not have in place a next tier for leadership within the staff. So succession planning was not something that this Y had done. And I was mindful of that as we moved into hiring our new person and as we were picking an interim. So it was key for me to always be in touch with the YWCA USA. They sent me great opportunity to talk with potential interims. But I also, at the same time, was talking to the key funder leaders in our community about the transition. Wanting them to know the board was committed to doing this the right way, that there was no person on the board or within the staff that could go to the level of an interim director. And so I was proposing that we hire a search firm and that we also hire an interim. And that was the message that I was consistently saying to the board. I was consistently saying to the staff and to the community funders.
Absolutely. And so I'm honing in on a couple of things. One, you talked about talking to the community while you were talking to, because YWCA has a national organization, kind of an affiliation. You were talking to both. Did you receive any pushback?
Well, not from the YWCA. I mean, they were like right there. In the community, the pushback, I guess I would say, is I came to them saying, help me understand what you know about our organization. You've been with us longer than I've been on the board. And so it gave people plenty of permission just to tell me everything that they had been happy, frustrated about over the last probably 7 or 8 years. I did that with a few private donors as well, people who had been consistently giving large gifts. So it wasn't just the foundation community. And then I also engaged former board members that I had trusted relationships from when I was at the community foundation, to ask them, what was it like when you were on the board? Why did you leave? When did you leave? So I was just I was allowing people to really get things off their chest, and always felt that when I left, I thanked them. I asked them to hang in there with us. And then I told them, I will get back to you. And I did. I mean, every single one of these individuals were hearing from me, either with phone calls, lunch meetings, or emails about, here's where we're at, and here's where we're going. So that everything was very transparent. There was no, and part of this is based on the organization's history in the community, which was, I think, is a piece of information that you always have to keep in mind, is where is the community with you? Not just your immediate board, your immediate funders, your staff. but where is your community partners and the community at large with you so that you can bring everybody into this process where it's appropriate and keep them all informed?
And it sounds like, Sandra, you were setting about, in a way, a bit of a listening tour and almost an external assessment as you were getting ready for this transition. Did that allow you to make what I think was a very good, excellent kind of interim? Did that allow you to determine the kind of interim you needed to lead the organization, because you had that kind of backdrop of how the community was feeling and such? Did that help you make a
Yes,
decision?
it did. I mean, it was, thinking back on it, how these pieces of information converged was YWCA USA was saying, we have a pool of former high-level administrative staff people. We think we can find you somebody. So my member rep, having known what I was struggling with our board and staff, said, I'm going to send you some names. I said, okay, great. The feedback I got in the community was consistent in that people were saying the first line in your mission is eliminating racism. What is it that the Y has done, right? And woefully inadequate in those areas. There's no doubt about it. But I thought one of the things that we can do is we can jump into this by hiring a person of color and being intentional about that and saying that we are intentional about it, and that's okay to do. And so I remember saying that so that I could get comfortable with it as well. And it helped me then when I was interviewing potential interims. I knew what I needed to say to them about, here's where we're at, here are the challenges. I need somebody who can walk into this. And the person we got walked into it and knew exactly what to do. And then I could say, okay, great, that piece is taken care of, and now I can focus on the search, right? So it was the combination of feedback and helpful criticism from the community, as well as what the YWCA USA could offer us in terms of choices. And it ended up being the right person at the right time.
Do you think, well, how do you, so let me back up. So now the interim is in place. And I always say, a board isn't in the weeds of running an organization and operating an organization. So the board doesn't know what they don't know. And so now you find yourself, you have this interim leader. And how long did you think that you would need an interim leader? Did you have a time frame?
Yeah, I did. I naively had a time frame. And one of the things that people would say about me is that, I'm pretty decisive and I get it out there. And so I thought, okay, I'm retired. I'm the only person on the board that's got this much time. All these other women, families working, I get it, right? So I'm going to take the lead on this, but I have a life as well. So I thought, okay, 3 to 4 months, right? And as I was saying this to the funders, because one of the things I also knew was I had done the calculations with our treasurer about money and the fiscal sense of what we were working with and what we were going to need. So I would go to the funders and I would say, this is what I'm looking for in terms of financial support. I had already gotten a major gift from a donor who longtime supporter, but I also said, and I'm hopeful that we'll get this done in 3 to 4 months. And they all said to me, well, you're wrong about that. It's going to take longer than that. It's going to take 6 to 7 months. And I went, oh no. So in working with our interim, we did a contract, and this was something new as well. Our community typically does not do interims. This community either promotes from within or quickly finds, turns around and finds somebody and puts them in place. And
Mm-hmm.
RY had never done a national search or an interim. And I said, we're stepping into being a big dog. I'm tired of people treating a woman-led organization as a peasant organization. This is going to right now. So we embraced the fact that it was going to cost us this much money, and we knew that we wouldn't have had it in the budgets, and the board agreed when the presentation was made that we would dip into our reserves if we needed to. We were able to find some support from our United Way because they have capacity building dollars, and they wanted to see the YW succeed. So that was wonderful. So I mean, as it ended up, and I have learned to say this, Christy, is that finding the right people is more important than finding the money. The money will come if you find the right person. And that has been proven to me over and over again, because even the woman that we hired came to us outside of our range of salary. We brought her in for what she wanted, and she has been able to be a real development person and has brought in more money herself. So yes, I have seen that. So yeah, the working of trying again and get the community leaders engaged with our donor population, and then having everybody embrace our interim. And our interim led the message, that led the way, because she was a woman of color. And so people began to associate our new leadership with a person of color as our work toward eliminating racism. And we've not stopped with that. It's just continued.
And that's certainly knowing YWCA, the mission, the history, as you and I both do, we know that that was very important. So you were kind of laser focused and, as you said, intentional, which I think is also important when nonprofit board leaders are selecting interims. I mean, there are two things that I love that you did. I've gone back to this community assessment work, and obviously more was done. But the community assessment, having, your finger on the pulse of kind of what would be needed inside the organization, but also what you were hearing outside. So that you lined up, Sandra, beautifully, success during the interim period. And then, you found the right leader to be the interim, which then allowed you to even further refine and define the leader that you needed for the long term.
Right.
As
Right.
I saw it in our partnership together. What role? So if you were talking to other boards, and other boards were, board chairs or leaders of a search committee were saying, think we need an interim. What guidance would you give them based off of the conversation? I mean, the things that you were able to do. I mean, if they have a national association, obviously that's one place to look. But, what else would you tell them to consider as they're thinking about hiring an interim?
Really trying to get the sense of the staff culture, and where is the organization now that the CEO has gone? Is it a celebratory moment? Was everybody happy about it? Was it a end to a long career, or was it one that was really fraught with frustration and sadness and toxicity? So really knowing and understanding that, and how the board gets their fingers on that is tricky. It really is. As I said earlier, we did not have built in a succession plan. We now have a second tier admin person who would be our succession plan. And I think that understanding and letting staff know we're going to do this is critical, or having that frank conversation with that person who could be stepping into this. Now, the frank conversation means if you're planning to apply for the CEO position, you probably should not be the interim, right? And that's the other thing, is that knowing what the role is of the interim. They come in, they clean up, they organize, they make peace, and then they leave. They are a placeholder, and really understanding that at the board level is critical. Because you want the board to know, we are in transition as well. So there may be former board members in the community. There may be retired staff people in the community who could be helpful and would be willing to do this. I think clearly paying them, making it a professional contract is critical, not just, saying, oh, could you come in and
volunteer?
Yeah, right. No, that's not what this is about. So, and frankly, I don't think there's anything wrong with bringing in somebody who doesn't know the community or the community doesn't know them. I mean, it was like a breath of fresh air for people to have our interim come in and do the community rounds of, similar to what I did. Tell me what you know. What is it that you'd like to see us do better? What have we done well for you? And then move on. I was getting sometimes daily, certainly weekly reports,
Right.
the interim, and it was, wow. I knew this much. And then I knew a whole lot more, right? And
Right.
but I needed to have the interim tell me this, and people, again, because there was no buy-in to this person. They knew she was the interim and was going to be leaving the community, right? They could
That's
say
right.
whatever they wanted to say. And there's
That's
some
right.
real benefit to that, because if it's somebody that you're going to see next week at some concert someplace or at the local restaurant, you're going to be hesitant to say
Yes.
things. So
Yes.
there's benefit in bringing in an interim who is not known to your community. That is for sure.
That's right.
And take a little bit of time with it. The world is not going to come to an end, folks. You can take your time and do your best thinking about it with outside consultation, like I had from the YWCA USA, about doing all of this. And, I'm grateful that our board we had built relationships enough at that point with new board members that people trusted the recommendations that were coming to us. And, they were all committed. I mean, I had just recruited some new board members. They had been on the board a few months. And
wow.
Yeah. Now, one of them left.
Yes.
I remember one of the consultants I talked to said, well, you know what? You didn't need that person as a board member anyway, because this is what board members do. This is tough work, right?
That's right.
And the other people have been just stellar. I mean, stellar board members. So, sometimes it's the crisis work that really brings out the best in board members. And I was willing to take whatever they could give me. And some of them have just been right there, rock solid, to support every decision that we had to face.
Yeah, I mean, I know, experiencing those board members that were on the search committee, the amount of time they put in, and the dedication they had, the attention to the details, about the leaders, the qualities we were looking for. Then, of course, the deliberation and everything that we went through, to find the candidate, who's now leading the organization beautifully. I'm with you in terms of, you had a dedicated group of board members, and they remain dedicated,
Right.
to the mission and to the work. Your interim, once your interim, started working in the organization, how would you describe? I mean, did she lead? How did she prepare the organization for the incoming CEO? You had some turnarounds and change management. I mean, you had some things going on.
Yeah.
And your interim seemed to really kind of catapult some work inside of the organization before we brought on the new leader.
Yeah. What was key about her time with us, she quickly, because of her years of experience as a COO, quickly identified a couple of areas that were putting the organization at risk. So there were things that were troublesome, no doubt about it. But when she got to really understanding the scope of our work in the community and our role, she knew there were relationships, contract deliverables, funding concerns that were all bubbling to the top that were going to put the organization at risk if not attended to immediately. And those were the ones that she brought to me and then the executive committee and of course the full board. There were not immediate dismissals. We didn't have problems with any kind of criminal action. We did have legal issues, but the legal issues had been there prior and had not been appropriately attended to. And so again, because of her depth of experience, she said, we need this, this, and this to take care of this. And the board trusted her and said, okay, you've got this, this, and this. We give you permission. We allocated the money. We found the people in the community to help, and on we went. So within the first 6 weeks, there was sort of a right balancing of roles and expectations. And what she described as always being culture issues, relationships among the staff that had been there for years and needed to be attended to. And so by the time we were interviewing, we and the search committee had a pretty good sense of the type of leader we were going to need to walk in. And it was going to need to be somebody who had the velvet glove, right? The soft, but the firm. That's held out to be true. Because it certainly wasn't all taken care of over the 4 months that our interim was with us. And the other thing is that we all know that since COVID, there has been a complete change in how people do business at home, through Zoom. Our interim was not from Michigan. And so when she was out of the state, she was doing all of her work from home in Florida over Zoom. And people had questions about how is this going to work, right? It worked beautifully, but it worked beautifully because of who she was, right? And it worked beautifully because of how the staff related and responded to her. So we had to work with board members who were saying, I don't know, we're paying this much money and she's not even in the building. And I said, look, we paid that much money for somebody who was in the building.
Who was in the building. Right. That's right.
So let's be clear about what works and what doesn't work, right?
That's right.
I mean, it was looking at us right in the face. But, you know, some of that is, and I said to the board members, I said, this is one of the biggest responsibilities, fiscal responsibility and the hiring of the exec. This is our primary jobs. So, you know, you need to ask whatever questions, get out whatever is in your gut. And so I appreciated people saying those things so that we could then have a fuller discussion. But yeah, the interim really did help set the table. Now, you know, our new CEO in the first couple of months has also had to do, you know, this kind of juggling around because now she's bringing in hers. And, you know, you think about all the transitions that the staff had to go through. And that, you know, our interim said, you got to love on them. And you know, that's what she brought. She brought, again, the velvet fist about, you know, I'm firm, but yet I love you. And that's what our staff needed because they do tough work, very tough work.
Yes, that's a trend that I see among interims, at least the interims that I am finding myself work with, our firm works with. They can be firm, but they also acknowledge and understand that the staff is gone. This is a lot of change, right? They've lost their leader. They have an interim. They're going to have another leader. And, you know, we have to give them some grace, you know, for sticking with it and, you know, coming to work and doing their work and leading the you know, hopefully, you know, affirming the mission and so forth. But at the same time, there are some things that need attention. And I do find those to be some of the most successful engagements. One of the things, Sandra, as we get ready to wrap up, one, I just want to thank you for sharing all of this and reliving it all.
Yes.
I so appreciate that. But I remember one of the opportunities, and I'm going to say this from the search firm uh, perspective. One of the opportunities we had was to include the interim in some of our final interviews.
Right.
And that was, of course, we're the search firm, so we're kind of Switzerland and agnostic, but at the same time, I watched that unfold. How helpful was that to you and your committee as you decided and determined who should lead this organization and whom you should hire?
Yeah. I really questioned whether or not we should do that when we were moving more into the final candidates and what the plan was. And I began to realize that the board had really glommed onto our interim in a way that they wanted her input. They had such a high degree of trust in her judgment and in her assessment that it made sense. It just made sense. And she and I would talk about, the next steps. And she would tell me what her gut was telling her. And I said, well, it's one, I agree with you. And two, the other members on the search committee are going to want to hear from you. You need to say it to them the same way you're saying it to me. And if I had enough confidence in the search committee that if they didn't agree with her or if there was any question, they would push back. And that was true. There were a couple who would, but it was, again, it was who she was. Her time with us had proven to be just what we needed in terms of identifying issues and taking care of them. And because she came out of a YWCA, that is where we want to be, more successful, more money, more programming. People thought, her credibility is just so high in this area. Why wouldn't we bring her into this process? So yeah, she became an equal member of the team for sure. Yeah.
It was very, I would say it was helpful. I could tell that let me say this. I could tell it was helpful to you all in your deliberations.
Yeah.
For us as a search firm, the outcome and the direction you want to go in, we go in that direction. But it was, I could see the trust that they placed in the interim, and the interim had a great point of view and, vision, or at least as the work ahead and who could do that work and
Right.
who would resonate with the staff, right? And those things were those are intangibles. Those are opportunities. We don't get that often when it's in a search where
Yeah.
someone has that much insight, So it was great. And I will also say, Sandra, as a part of our process, we include the staff. We have the meet and greet with the staff, and the staff was I suspect they were in a much different place when they were ready to meet the candidates. And of course, they, weighed in on the candidates and so forth, gave us some assessment. Of course, they don't get to select their boss, but they certainly gave us some feedback that was also helpful and aligned with the interim. So it it all worked very well. And so pleased that, here we are in April of 2025, and the leader of YWCA Greater Flint has been in the role now since September
Yep.
of 24. And we are getting close to a big event that you have coming up in April or at the end of this month, and I so look forward to attending that event again and seeing everyone. It'll be a sort of a reunion
Yeah.
for me, for Broadview, to come to that event. Is there any kind of final words or wisdom you want to share with our listening audience about the value of hiring an interim leader?
Yeah, I know for myself, I learned a lot, and I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants for a while there, but it was fine. When you get to this place in your life, it's like you trust your gut and your experience, right? And that was what made it so rewarding for me to work with the interim, because she also had so much experience and trust in her gut about what she saw as necessary for our organization. Um, she had clinical background as well as programmatic experience. So it was on any given day, I didn't know if I was talking to her, the clinical person or the program person. But I also appreciated how she embraced the whole board, because again, as I said, as I started this conversation with you, bringing everybody along, she brought the community along. People did not want to see her leave.
Mhm.
Because they felt she was part of us. I mean, she had done such a great job. The funders felt that way. The donors felt that way, and clearly the staff. Um, and so it was meant to be. I feel really grateful for how our paths crossed, and that the YWCA USA was instrumental in that. Um,
Mhm.
and that the community trusted that our organization, as I said earlier, was going to be a big dog in this community, and we were going to do it the right way, which is why we hired Broadview, because it was important for me to have a search firm whose mission was committed to diversity and leadership roles, because again, that's what we wanted and that's what we got, both with the interim and with our new CEO. So
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
I am grateful to Broadview. I'm grateful to you, Christy. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It really was it was an honor and a pleasure to be a part of it. And I think there's a little piece of me that's now feels very well. I'm very feel connected to YWCA Greater Flint and to the Flint community. And I will also say, Sandra, that the interim and we've talked about this approach for other YWCA organizations in particular, but certainly other organizations that have the ability to have a national office who can perhaps use previous leaders or retired leaders, and then help local affiliates. I do think there is something, the secret sauce in there is mission alignment and understanding how to work in that particular organization. So we
Yeah.
have I keep telling her, I mean, she's going to join me on the podcast as well. I'm going to get her to join, because I think, she offers some great insights as that interim leader. And I do believe there's a bit of a best practice in how you kind of align, previous leaders. I like to say that when those of us who decide to step away from whatever it is we've done for a long time or what have you, that we don't necessarily retire, we kind of rewire.
Right.
And so, Sandra, look out. Some
Yeah.
other board in Flint's probably going to say, "Let's find Sandra Murphy. She did this once. Can she do this again for our community?"
Okay. Well, if that should come, I'll entertain the opportunity for sure, while I'm making travel plans and doing other things in my
Doing
garden.
other things, right?
That's
I
right.
understand. Well, I'm
That's
glad
right.
you are having some fun and making some travel plans and probably getting some of those good walks that you
Yes.
you and I used to have some talks over your walks.
That's right. That's right. For sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here with me today, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.
Yeah. Very soon. Thank you, Christy. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Have a good one. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.